Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is our weekly pulse check, taking a look at some interesting news items in the world of automation and AI. Michael, let's dive right in.
All right.
First article comes to us from EX Today and is titled, Microsoft CEO says that AI agents will transform SaaS, or software as a service, as we know it. Now, this article could have been titled The Death of SaaS or The End of ERP or something like that, maybe a little bit more provocative, but it is getting a lot of buzz out there because, Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, I mean, he doesn't shy away from saying some pretty, extravagant things. But he definitely has people talking because he's starting to look at what agentic AI in particular can mean for ERP applications, business applications, even the way we use Microsoft Office applications. So talk about the things that he said and give us your thoughts on those, if you would.
So I think this is another example of how technology is going to change the way we interact with applications. I think the first one, or at least the one that comes to mind that makes it easier to describe is when we got the iPhone, it was a completely new way of interacting with applications. And even now, when we interact with our touch devices, we do a long hold for one thing, or we click on something or other, or we use our face to unlock the phone, or whatever it's going to be. We interact differently with that technology than we did, say, if we were using a keyboard, right? Mm-hmm. So I see this kind of going that direction, and it's an interesting way of describing how to interact with it. ERP has been on for quite some time, and over those years, the interactions have been clunky at best. And most of that has to do with the fact that there's different modules that were added on to be able to leverage how you get specific data or specific workflows within the, that application. When we start looking at redoing or rethinking that interaction, now it becomes a new way of, if I was unencumbered by things like the keyboard or having to go through a specific workflow because the application forced me to, and I could simply ask using my voice, I'd like a report on last month's activity related to our widgets produced in London. Mm-hmm. Then the agent, or whatever you want to call it behind the scenes, would translate my voice, translate the actions and intent I was going to do, kick off a bunch of different processes to make that happen, whatever happens behind the scenes, and then bring me back to a report where it could ask me, do you want this visually or do you want me to read it to you? Mm-hmm. That's a way we interact with an application that would be now very different than what we'd expect now, which is go in and click this, type in this, click that, do the drop-down menu, go to this section, etc. So I think part of that has to do with, and I love the way they describe it because I haven't heard this description for a while. I'll just read the quote here. The Microsoft CEO expounded on this point, suggested that at a fundamental level, SaaS or /business applications are essentially CRUD databases, and CRUD meaning the acronym create, read, update, and delete. Yep, with business logic. And so you see this; these are data repositories that have business logic attached to them. And because that business logic right now is within these applications at this click and drop and drag level, he's saying, well, because we have those business logic there, if we reimagine this and brought that business logic into these agents, we would fundamentally interact with data in a different way. Now, the way this article goes on about it, though, it brings out a bunch of different things, which is, does that mean I have to redo all my logic now for my business applications in these agents? And that would be the case, because in fact, that's where the business logic lies right now. So I think there's a good overlap in terms of the idea being a good idea. I'm thinking the application or the applying this to these applications, the application word, applying this to these applications in a different way may take some doing, and maybe there's different ways to apply it. But I believe his fundamental thesis on this being we're going to interact with applications in a different way because of AI, I think it stands.
Yeah. I also found it intriguing the way that he framed this up. And I think when you contemplate what it would be like if all the logic was in the AI tier, you could imagine using AI agents instead of having to get into an SAP screen or an Oracle.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people would be attracted to the idea of getting away from the old ERP and the clumsiness of their user interfaces. I also like the fact that Nadella is not afraid of making this kind of provocative statement that in the end might even disrupt Microsoft. You think about Excel and PowerPoint, Word, and in the article, he even says how those applications, what they do could ultimately be replaced by agents. So you don't need an Excel spreadsheet to house information or logic. You would ask the agent to do what you want, and it's not going to need a spreadsheet or need those tools. So, anytime an executive says something that could disrupt his own company, I think that's pretty bold. So I admire that.
I agree.
Well, let's go to the next article. This one's from TechCrunch, and it's titled 2025 will be the year climate tech learns to love AI. Now, we've talked quite a bit on this show and on other podcasts about the power shortage that is a result of the increased AI demand, all the new AI data centers that are cropping up. And the experts say that a serious power shortage is likely as soon as 2027 if we don't figure out how we're going to meet this new demand. And so this article kind of comes at that topic. And I thought overall it was a pretty positive article. It's not, it's written by a climate reporter. So you could see how he might be looking at this pretty gloom and doom, given the climate unfriendly presidential administration that's coming in the U.S. But I thought he had some pretty hopeful vibes in what he had to say. So tell me what you thought about it.
So from an article standpoint, I think the AI loving climate tech was an interesting approach to it. I'm not really sure that that the climate tech is going to love AI, mainly because it's still going to be sucking a lot of juice. I think where it's coming from is the alternatives that were explored within this are things that we've talked about and we've seen in various other news outlets in terms of alternate sources of energy that will be supplying the power for these. We talked about nuclear now several times. I think that they brought this up and said, well, maybe fusion power. This is the year of fusion, which has been said now for a decade or more. Maybe they're hopeful that perhaps we have some breakthrough from a fusion perspective to be able to have some other sort of nuclear energy that's slightly different than our current standard. They also talk about hydrogen and others, but I'm hopeful that there is a sort of a symbiotic relationship where leveraging AI to do some of the modeling and some of the activities to support the research into some of these new technologies will then help spur the growth of those technologies, which will then fuel the AI that is doing that. So I'm hoping we get to this circular activity where AI actually is beneficial. Right now, it is very much sucking the juice without necessarily producing a climate-friendly way of doing that.
Yeah, although the new presidential administration is not known to be very climate-friendly.
True.
It is helpful to note that it was during the previous Trump administration that a lot of the startups and climate tech companies kind of got their start. So the article mentions that maybe this is a positive thing, that we'll see some more innovation come up, especially now that we have such a sizable energy demand issue. So
right, and I think this is more than just AI. I mean, if we broaden the scope of this, the energy requirements to power our EV cars and buses and trains and everything, it's all demanding electrical energy. So going to that point of saying, listen, we actually need to have additional power sources, not just for AI, but for all the other stuff that we're moving to help bring it into that electrical age where everything's electric. we're really going to need to think differently about how we generate electricity to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, our next article is from The Guardian, and it's titled, "I received a first, but it felt tainted and undeserved. Inside the university AI cheating crisis." Now, for those outside the UK, a first is a scholastic honor or designation, similar in the US to summa cum laude, I guess, something like that. I just wanted to say that because I had to look it up. I didn't quite understand what they meant.
Yes, because we're Americans.
Yes, but this is a really interesting article. So it's talking about suspicion and distrust and accusations and people turning on each other, and it's all because of the prevalence now of ChatGPT being used in higher ed. And there are a lot of higher ed administrators and professors and others that are using software to try to detect where students are using generative AI and delivering their assignments. Some of that is proving to be faulty, so people are getting falsely accused. And then there's other cases where they're not catching it. So there's a dilemma around, plagiarism and just the bad side of what we knew ChatGPT could do in the education sector. So this article just kind of peels that back and features a lot of stories that I thought were, each of them in and of themselves was really interesting. So Michael, give us your take on this.
Well, I felt during reading this, I felt outraged to start with as I listened to the story and how it came about, because I'm a big proponent of leveraging the new technology we have to assist with learning and the capability of the critical thinking perspectives and the aspect of applying that critical thinking to solving problems.
Right.
When you start talking about identifying critical thinking capabilities by reviewing papers specifically, unless there's a particular reason why you have to go by a paper or a research paper to be able to do that, for example, for a multi-year PhD or whatever, where you're actually going to want to show the work, have the discussion behind it. If this is simply an assignment that someone had done to go through and get that information out, and yet they're still being questioned about it, now I think you're missing the point of what those exercises are meant to do. So it got me angry as this one story came forward and indicated that this guy's paper, in fact, was flagged as being potentially generated completely by ChatGPT, and he was very distraught because he actually did it. And some of the telltale signs they're pointing to, we could probably see this in a number of different things where the word delve comes up way more often in ChatGPT than it does in actual conversations or people's usage of a language, English language at this point. So they use those telltale signs then to identify potential fraud or potential ChatGPT generation. Yeah. The challenge is that, English has so many words and you can only say some things so many different ways. So when it comes to identifying that, whether it's been generated by a person or by a ChatGPT environment, you have to wonder what the end point could ever be, because quite honestly, it's very difficult for someone who is creating content like we do on a daily basis. You say things and there's always, again, only so many words you can use. And now granted, we could go back to Old English maybe and really throw a loop into it, because ChatGPT wouldn't necessarily be generating that for us. It would. But the idea behind it is, what are you trying to get at from these assignments? What are you trying to prove from these assignments? Is it the critical thinking? Then maybe there's a different way of approaching it. Or if you know that people are going to be using ChatGPT, or even encourage them to use it, because in business now, a lot of people do use it, or it's like going into this concept of saying, well, we accept this as a new reality. Yeah. And we are going to embrace it. And we're going to have you create a different type of thought experiment to allow you to show your smarts based on this, and then leverage the tools. So, like I said, either that or we just go back to locking kids in a room with a pencil and paper and say, okay, write your paper now. And that'd be something that I think nobody will ever endorse. Yeah. Because it doesn't make the students we want. It creates some artificial environment. So again, I was a bit upset when I read the first story because it really got me thinking about what the real target is for education, and it is not what they were describing.
Yeah. I agree with your thoughts. There are plenty of positive examples where generative AI is being used in schools, both higher ed as well as below higher ed. And that's by teachers and the students. The teachers themselves are getting tremendous benefit from being able to create lesson plans or create tests or grade tests. A lot of stuff that, quite honestly, keeps them up late at night. It's mindless work, and they're so underpaid. We need to give these teachers a break.
So true.
I think Gen AI is a great way to do that. I think on the student side, there are so many ways they can leverage it that don't relate to creativity, like writing a point of view or giving writing a poem or writing an opinion piece, like doing research, like aggregating material around a topic or summarizing, a 300-page, white paper and pulling out some of the high points. I mean, that's stuff you and I do every day in our business work. So I think students can benefit from that. I disagree that it is, diminishing the education experience for most students. I think if it's used correctly, it can be pretty powerful. So
the only thing I would say, so when you mentioned that last thing about summarizing, the only thing I could say from a summarization perspective, because both of us, we had Cliff Notes growing up, which were summarized, capable for, so you could say, what did Dostoevsky's book say in here? You go to Cliff Notes, get the full story written out. What you're missing in that, though, is the art form of how the art was then produced, to get the feelings of the art. You can get a good summary about the content, but it doesn't provide that art. So I think that's probably the only benefit you'd have, not the only, I think it's one of the benefits that you'd have by actually reading the work. But you and I both know, it's probably very unlikely that people are putting a lot of art into their writing of a 300-page report. It's likely just to get the content out and make it digestible. So again, there's a pro and con for this, and it really, what are you trying to accomplish at the end of the day here? Is it really to get the content out? Is it to understand? Is it to think critically about things? Is it to express your appreciation for the art that's involved in the work? Understanding that will help develop a better approach to understanding what's good or what's not good.
Well said. Okay, our final article, and this is a fun one. This is from The Byte, B-Y-T-E. And it's titled, Facebook Planning to Flood Platform with AI-Powered Users. Well, this article reinforces my decision to stay away from Facebook. As Meta says that they are aiming to have Facebook filled with AI-generated characters that can drive engagement, that can do posts, that can create content, that can interact with you. Think of having a virtual girlfriend or a virtual boyfriend on Facebook that maybe you created or someone else created. Boy, this generates a whole lot of thoughts in my head. Michael, is this a good idea? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think we actually need more of this on Facebook, because what we have right now isn't enough. What's interesting about this is that Facebook went through a whole sweep a while back to get rid of the bots that were on Facebook. And here they're themselves reintroducing them to the platform that they swept clean of them, or tried to at least. So I thought that was a very interesting way of approaching it, saying, yes, we got rid of them all, but we're bringing them all back. And this time they're going to be AI powered. This is going to be something that it will be very difficult to overcome. So I guess I don't understand what the point behind it is, like the real point behind it is, the driving engagement. You can tell me what things are worth, but why would you, for a platform that already has billions of users, why would you need to add more? I just don't understand. And if they're saying it needs to drive more engagement or needs to drive more discussion, I suspect that the discussions that are being had now, because you and I both, I don't have Facebook. I know lots of people who do, and the way they interact with Facebook is quite disturbing sometimes. It's more of a rant place than anything else. So to have that kind of engagement be encouraged seems like it could be even more dangerous than the real users we already have. But those are my thoughts on it. What do you think?
I could not agree more. I mean, we have enough trouble getting people, young people particularly, to build positive relationships with each other. Why do we want them now to be building relationships with these fake people on Facebook? And you're right. When it's not real, I think it in a sense motivates bad behavior. People are going to create these profiles that have bad intentions. So I hope, if this does come to fruition, that Facebook has the right guardrails around it. But we don't want these fake profiles taking people down a path to self-harm, or giving them bad advice, or trying to just take them off of the narrow path. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong.
Oh, I don't see any chance of abuse of this, Brad. I think you're just being an alarmist.
So anyway, we'll leave it at that. But it was humorous, but also concerning. And I'm not surprised that this kind of thing continues to crop up. I know we're going to see more and more examples each and every day. Well, thanks for joining us. That's all that time we have today for our Pulse Check. Remember, we post another podcast every week with a tremendous guest. So be sure and check that out. And we will see you next time on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.